Welcome to Ryan's running reviews in partnership with Roadrunner Sports, and today we're taking a look at one of the largest running shoes that Brooks has ever made. It's the Glycerin Max. Let's run with it. Before we get started, I do want to say these shoes were provided to me by Roadrunner Sports. However, no one had a chance to preview this video, and the style synopsis is my own. I'd also like to say please leave a like on the video and consider subscribing. Here we go. The Glycerin Max, as the name implies, is the much larger version compared to the Glycerin 21. Now, I do have to say the Glycerin 21 has been out for some time now, and the updated Glycerin 22 shares a lot more similarities with the Glycerin Max as far as the midsole construction goes, so be on the lookout for that. I also want to point out that the original Glycerin comes in a bunch of different versions. You have a GTS or a Go to Support Stability version, the original one, the one I have here in my hand, and then a Stealth Fit edition, which has a more snug, stretchy knit upper, while the Glycerin Max just comes in the Glycerin Max. So there's no other editions of this shoe, while the original Glycerin has a couple different configurations. And then if you're confused between the Glycerin Max and the Ghost Max, I'll put it this way. The Ghost Max is a more tame kind of running shoe. You can use it for walking. It's a little bit more orthotic friendly. Well, I think the Glycerin Max, at least in my opinion, is kind of more geared towards being a performance running shoe. The Glycerin Max also fits in this rather unique super trainer space, or I should say non-plated super trainer space. There is no plate in this shoe. Really kind of geared towards people that want the most amount of cushion possible for those easier days or long runs, and Brooks had yet to kind of fill that role, and that's really where this shoe comes in. As far as the stats go, the Glycerin Max costs $200 and weighs 10.5 ounces. It's not super light, not super heavy, about what you would expect, although if you're comparing it to something like the Super Blast, another Ultra Max cushion non-plated trainer, this is going to be much heavier. And then as far as the stack height goes, we have a whopping 47 millimeters in the heel and 41 in the forefoot for a low 6 millimeter drop. Most of the time, most Brooks running shoes are kind of in that 10 to 12 millimeter range, so they decided to kind of pare it down here in the Glycerin Max. Moving on to the upper, feels very much like a Brooks upper experience. Traditional mesh, average breathability, did fit true to size for me. You have this large Brooks logo with this kind of unique gummy-like texture. It's super interesting. I kind of like how it looks. And with regard to the overall styling, I think Brooks nailed it. This is a cool looking shoe for whatever that's worth. The tongue itself has a ton of padding and is not gusseted. For some reason, Brooks does not like to gusset the tongues on their running shoes. I'm really curious why, with the exception of I think the Hyperion Max 2, but I would love to see them start to gusset the tongues on their more conventional or other type of daily trainers. Towards the back, you also have a ridiculous amount of padding in the ankle and Achilles section. Very comfortable overall experience with one minor exception. I was only able to get about 15 miles in this shoe before I had one kind of glaring flaw, and this was really only maybe for me. I know a lot of people love this shoe, and it was only with my left shoe. The right shoe was absolutely fine. And that flaw was basically on the top part of the medial side. You have these foam sidewalls that come up to kind of allow your foot to sit within the midsole, gives you some stability, kind of helps with the overall guidance. However, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's a manufacturing defect or if it's just Ryan's foot is strange, I had a ton of rubbing right here, again, on the top part of the medial side that created a blister, and I really just could not keep running in it. It was just super painful. I tried doubling up on socks and things like that, and just kind of kept poking through, and you kind of feel that sharp edge with your fingers on the inside. Again, it's only on the left shoe, and I tried looking around to see if other people had this issue, and it appears to only be me, but I do want to point that out. The foam sidewalls do come up quite a bit, so if you have a wider foot, I could see that potentially being an issue, and again, I guess maybe just be a Ryan issue on my left shoe. However, other than that one small pain point, the rest of the upper worked fine, and my right shoe felt great. Lockdown was solid and plenty of comfort with the amount of padding that they gave you. Again, it feels very much like a Brooks upper experience here. And then for this massive midsole, they're doing something new this year called DNA Tuned. It's still nitrogen infused foam. However, different parts of the midsole have different types of foam. Now you're probably saying, Ryan, I've heard this before, different kind of dual density setups within a midsole. However, this is different because it's all integrated into the same foam as one piece. There's no fused layers or anything like that. It's very seamlessly integrated, mainly because of the manufacturing process. They start with this small puck of material, and you kind of see the different zones. You actually see this blue foam here towards the front and the rest of the white. And these different zones have a different level of density. Basically, this blue foam in the forefoot, and you kind of see it in the internal core as well, kind of shines through the white translucent midsole, is a smaller cell structure, while the white foam, which is found more towards the back part of the heel section, is a larger cell structure. So when they go through the nitrogen infused process, this small puck of material expands, creates the midsole you see here in front of you, and allows you to have this seamless, kind of consistent midsole that has different types of cushioning throughout, where the forefoot's going to be a bit more responsive with those small cell structures, and the heel's going to be a bit softer with the large cell structures. So I say all of that to say it's a nitrogen infused foam midsole, which they're calling DNA tuned, and it has a different configuration depending on what part of the shoe you take a look at, more responsive forefoot and softer heel section. As far as the stability goes, I will say it's a fairly stable neutral shoe despite its massive midsole. It's not overly soft or squirrely. And now on top of that, this shoe is super rigid and stiff. It's fairly hard to bend this thing. It does not have a plate, but honestly, it kind of has some of the same properties as a plated shoe just because of how rigid and stiff that midsole is. You also have those foam sidewalls that I talked about before. Yes, they gave me an issue again on the top part of the medial side. It's my foot interacted with it, but for the most part, it does kind of help keep your foot contained and help with the overall guidance of this stable neutral option. As far as the performance goes, it's a nice cruiser of a daily trainer. The stiffness of the midsole pairs nicely with the rocker geometry. It is rather large and bulky. Didn't love it for picking up the pace. It's really nice if you just want to take it out for those steady miles. And I do have to say, at $200, you start to look around and see what other options are out there. And I'd probably personally go more towards the Super Blast. It's a little bit lighter, has a little bit more energy return. This doesn't have the most spring or bounce to it. It feels a little bit more focused on cushioning. Yes, you do have a slightly more responsive forefoot, but I wouldn't necessarily consider it as bouncy or as expressive compared to what we see again on the Super Blast, which pretty much has a similar stack height and the same exact price. However, the Glycerin Max might be the slightly more durable option, mainly because you have a more robust upper. Nitrogen infused foam tends to hold up pretty well, and you have a more substantial outsole lug pattern. The rubber here is fairly thick and soft, and you have these vertical flex grooves that go through the forefoot, and I probably shouldn't call them flex grooves because since they're vertical, it kind of helps stiffen up the forefoot, and it's part of the reason why the shoe feels rather rigid. As you go towards the back of the shoe, you do have this kind of cutout section, which operates as like a mini trampoline, provides a little bit more squish to the already squishy heel section. Overall, while the Glycerin Max didn't necessarily work perfectly for me, mainly because I had that super rubbing point at the top part of the medial side, I think it's a solid cruiser of a daily trainer. I've seen a lot of people absolutely love this thing. And if you're someone who wants something maybe lighter and a bit faster in this Ultra Max cushion non-plated setup, I do have the Super Blast one. I do kind of slightly prefer that just because, again, it's a bit bouncier and lighter overall compared to the Glycerin Max. However, maybe if you're a larger, heavier runner or just want a ton of support and structure in your shoe, I think that's probably where the Glycerin Max might shine a bit more. And like I talked about before, the new, I think, Glycerin 22 will have the same kind of DNA tuned setup, but with a much smaller midsole. So if you're someone who wants to kind of try this configuration without having to go to a $200 super large shoe, the Glycerin 22 is on the way. Well, that concludes my review. Let me know in the comments what you think of this new Brooks midsole setup. I would love to hear from you. I'm Ryan from Ryan's Running Reviews, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks.